I'm Sarah Aston, and I am discussing the Paris Peace Conference and the Treaty of Versailles, two topics of related historical value that came to be in 1919 after the Great War. To put an end to World War I, international delegates gathered at Versailles, just outside of Paris, France, in January of 1919 to create a treaty to establish the terms of post-war peace. This historical conference became known as the Paris Peace Conference. This document, as shown in the picture on the left, established compromises agreed upon during the meeting. It was later named the Treaty of Versailles. The picture on the right displays the Hall of Mirrors, one of the halls that the delegates from international countries gathered to discuss and form the historical treaty. As you can see, a large amount of people were involved in the Paris Peace Conference. However, some took a more active role than others. The treaty was molded around the ideas of three dominant individuals. The Big Three, as they were called, included David Lloyd George from Great Britain, Jorge Clemenceau from France, and President Woodrow Wilson for the United States. Each of these men had their own opinions on how the Allies should approach Germany. Lloyd George was very concerned about his public image, which caused him to stand behind a harsher punishment for Germany's offenses than he really believed in. Lloyd George wanted Germany to face consequences, but he did not want Germany to become so weak that it would turn to communism. Clemenceau strongly urged for Germany to be made completely enfeebled, so that it would be rendered totally unable to ever start or participate in a war again. The ideas of President Wilson differed somewhat from Lloyd George and Clemenceau's. Wilson wanted to steer clear of too much involvement. He hoped that Germany would be punished, but in a way that would lead to eventual peace with the European nations. The finished document satisfied each of the Big Three in its own ways and contained the following changes. First and foremost, the Treaty of Versailles demanded that Germany accept full responsibility for the war, and it was held accountable for paying for all of the damage that it caused, though the exact figure of Germany's debt was not set in the treaty. This particular clause was a topic of considerable dispute in Germany and sparked much bitterness towards the Allies. This war guilt angered the German people, who blamed their government for starting the war and protested that they should not have to suffer for a decision that they did not make. Also, Germany was barred from the League of Nations for a limited time, which further angered the German people. After Germany had been identified as guilty, the Allies thought a redistribution of territory was in order. The Treaty of Versailles was responsible for redrawing the pre-war map and turning it into the map we have today. According to the treaty, Germany was to give up Alsace-Lorraine to France, Eupen and Moldavia to Belgium, northern Schleswig to Denmark, Holstein to Czechoslovakia, and West Prussia, Posen, and Upper Silesia to Poland. The Saar, Danzig, and Memel were put in the hands of the League of Nations and were given the right to vote on whether or not they wanted to be a part of Germany. Germany's overseas colonies were also given to the League of Nations. Finally, Germany was required to return the land taken from Russia in the Treaty of Brest. This land included Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia. The changing of borders and power, while satisfying the Allies, brought new problems within those regions. Opposing ethnic groups were forced to come together. This created a breeding ground for violence in those regions. Many of these areas were against European control and wanted to be independent, though most of these nations were severely weakened after being separated from its mother country. Secondly, the Treaty of Versailles greatly restricted the Germanic military. Its terms stated that Germany was required to reduce its army to 100,000 men. Germany was no longer allowed tanks, an air force, or submarines, and were only allowed 6 capital ships. Under the treaty's conditions, the Allies were permitted to keep an army of occupation on the west bank of the Rhine River, for 15 years and no German soldier or weapon was allowed to access it. In this picture, you can see the Germanic military preparing to lose its tanks and a large chunk of their men. In the end, this decree of the Treaty of Versailles did not do much for hindering the German military's future preparation for World War II. Finally, the treaty also weakened Germany financially. Germany faced monetary penalties of reparations to pay for the damage caused by the war. The loss of vital industrial territory, such as the coal-rich lands of Saar and Upper Silesia, was a significant economic blow that hindered Germany from rebuilding its economy. Germany was also forbidden to unite with Austria in an attempt to keep Germany's potential economic progress to a minimum. Many felt that the sum of Germany's financial payments to the Allies exceeded its capacity to pay, as seen in the featured political cartoon. The image depicts Germany being crushed by the massive amount of reparations it was ordered to pay by the Allies in the Treaty of Versailles. The cartoonist illustrates that though they were promised the money on paper, the Allies would be unlikely to receive it. The figure demanded is unrealistic, and Germany will most likely not have the means to fulfill the agreement. The financial burdens of the reparation payments added to the already brewing displeasure felt by the German people towards the Allies. When the treaty was brought before Germany, the German people were shocked. Leader of the German peace delegation, Count von Brockdorff-Rantzau, wrote a letter to Jorge Clemenceau in response, urging the Allies to ease up on their demands. Rantzau explains that the treaty is too harsh and would likely cause his country's people immense suffering. Rantzau encourages a more peaceful solution and even makes his own counter-proposals to come to a more diplomatic compromise. In one of said counter-proposals, he also expresses Germany's desire to take part in the League of Nations so that it could stand alongside the other countries as an equal. In Rantzau's letter of protest, he adamantly stresses the idea of a peaceful treaty. Clemenceau receives Rantzau's letter and consults with the Allies. In his response, Clemenceau makes it crystal clear that the aim of this treaty is not peace, but justice. Clemenceau feels that Germany deserves every one of the consequences listed in the Treaty of Versailles. He then announces that the Allies will not be altering their treaty to incorporate Rantzau's counter-proposals, and reminds Germany that it is in no position to be making demands. Clemenceau was determined to force Germany to face justice and suffer for the horrors of World War I. The Treaty of Versailles has faced and is still facing some controversy. Did Clemenceau's approach of justice do more harm than good, or should he have opted for a more peaceful solution? Though Germany committed many atrocities during World War I and was well deserving of severe consequences, I believe that the treaty was harsher than the German people could handle. Their discontent allowed for Hitler to rise to power and eventually began World War II. The Treaty of Versailles was definitely just, but the true purpose of a treaty is to come to a compromise to end a disagreement. This treaty, which was formed in accordance to Clemenceau and other leaders' ideas of punishment, failed in the aspect of solving the problems of the Great War. The Treaty of Versailles brought a growing resentment towards the Allies. Germany was initially angered after the treaty was written without its consultation. The political cartoons on this slide are a good example of how Germany felt about the way the treaty was presented to them. The first cartoon depicts the Big Four, forcing Germany to swallow their terms of peace, which are placed upon a spoon. The cartoonist draws a fist clenched around Germany to represent the pressure that the British Empire, France, America, Italy, and Japan put on Germany to sign the treaty. The fist prevents Germany from rejecting the spoon, which illustrates the point that Germany had absolutely no choice but to accept whatever the Allies asked of it. The second cartoon reiterates this point. This picture shows Germany receiving a notice to decide whether or not he accepts the Treaty of Versailles' terms of peace. Both Germany and the Allies are aware that Germany is incapable of continuing the war. The Allies make it clear that if Germany does not accept the treaty, they will resume war and eventually destroy the country. The cartoonist shows this by drawing a knife threatening to stab Germany and including the attached note that reminds Germany that it has already been defeated and cannot resist the conditions of the Treaty of Versailles. The contents of the treaty also angered the German people. It seemed as though the Treaty of Versailles only concerned revenge instead of the peace that the name treaty implied. This cartoon offers Germany's reaction to the Treaty of Versailles. The Germans saw the Allies as malicious and lacking peaceful intent. The picture shows the Allies mixing all kinds of unpleasant objects into the melting pot holding the peace soup. Some of these objects include guns and other weaponry. This serves as an indicator to the harsh terms that the Allies set in place within the Treaty of Versailles and the overall spite that the Allies felt towards Germany during the Paris Peace Conference. Lastly, Germany was significantly weakened by all of the economic losses inflicted by the Treaty of Versailles. The Allies were to relinquish Germany of nearly all of its power. This illustration depicts Clemenceau sucking the blood from vulnerable Germany like a vampire. The cartoon illustrates how the Allies plan to drain Germany of all of its power and economic resources, rendering it entirely at the mercy of its enemies. Germany felt the Allies were too harsh and had the sole hope of crippling and taking over Germany completely. The Treaty of Versailles bred hostility for the Allies among the Germanic people, along with a resentment for the current government. Many German citizens blamed their government for signing the treaty, though they had no choice. This discontentment paved the way for the rise of Hitler, as illustrated in this political cartoon. Hitler was elevated into power as a hero among the German people, who were so desperate for any kind of relief from the struggles that the Treaty of Versailles imposed on Germany. With discontent so high, it was simple for Hitler to take control and rally the Germanic people to exact revenge on the Allies. This eventually set in motion a Second World War and the deaths of thousands of people. In conclusion, while the terms of the treaty may have been just, it was not the best option. The complete disregard for peace led to another war and ultimately more deaths that could have been avoided. I have learned from this that while an option may not contain the justice that we feel is deserved, it could actually be the best one in terms of solving the actual problem at hand. A better blend of peace and justice could have eased the tensions that escalated into World War II and in turn saved the lives of thousands.